When we explore Carl Jung's psychology, one of the most fascinating dynamics is what happens when strength meets manipulation. In particular, when a narcissist realizes they cannot control you anymore, they often resort to one final desperate tactic, what many call the last dirty trick. Jung's ideas about the shadow, projection, and individuation help us understand why this happens and how women can recognize it before it causes harm. Jung believed that every person carries a shadow, the hidden, rejected parts of themselves that they don't want to face. Narcissists, however, rarely integrate their shadow. Instead, they project it onto others, blaming them for what they cannot accept in themselves. When you, as a strong woman, resist their manipulation, you essentially hold up a mirror to their shadow. This is intolerable for them. They feel exposed, vulnerable, and powerless. At first, the narcissist may attempt their usual strategies: flattery, guilt-tripping, or gaslighting. But when those no longer work, when you've grown strong enough to stand your ground, they often escalate. And it's in this escalation that their final dirty trick appears. For some, this may look like a smear campaign where they spread lies to damage your reputation. For others, it may involve sudden victim playing, where they cast themselves as the one who was wronged all along. Take the example of Elena, a woman who had endured years of emotional manipulation from her partner. After therapy and much inner work, she found her voice and started setting clear boundaries. When her partner realized he could no longer intimidate her, he shifted to portraying himself as the victim. He told friends and family that Elena was cold, selfish, and even abusive. This was his last desperate attempt to regain control, to project his shadow onto her so he wouldn't have to face it himself. In Jungian terms, Elena had begun the process of individuation, becoming her authentic self, separate from the false roles imposed on her. The narcissist, threatened by this, unleashed their final tactic to drag her back into the old dynamic. But instead of collapsing, Elena saw it for what it was: projection. She understood that his accusations said more about him than about her. This is the essence of the last dirty trick. When the narcissist can't win by controlling you directly, they try to win indirectly, through distortion, reputation attacks, or emotional sabotage. Recognizing this dynamic is crucial because it gives you the power to step out of the trap, to avoid taking the projection personally, and to continue on your journey toward wholeness. And before we dive deeper into the psychology behind this, and how Jung's concepts of the shadow and anima, or animus, reveal the hidden motives of the narcissist, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the rest of this series on psychology and healing. To understand why narcissists resort to this last dirty trick, we need to look closely at Jung's concept of projection. Projection occurs when someone attributes their own unacceptable qualities, feelings, or fears to another person. Instead of admitting, "I feel insecure," the narcissist might say, "You're insecure." Instead of admitting, "I feel out of control," they insist, "You're controlling." For the narcissist, projection is a way of avoiding responsibility for their own shadow. But when you grow strong enough to resist manipulation, you threaten this defense mechanism. You refuse to carry their shadow for them anymore. And that's when the last dirty trick appears. They try to force the shadow back onto you at any cost. Consider the story of Marisa, who grew up with a narcissistic mother. As a child, she was constantly told she was ungrateful and selfish whenever she expressed her own needs. As an adult, after years of personal growth, Marisa finally set boundaries. She limited contact and stopped rushing to rescue her mother from every crisis. Her mother's response? A smear campaign. She told relatives that Marisa had abandoned her, painting herself as the suffering mother of a cruel, unloving daughter. In Jungian terms, Marisa's mother could not bear to face her own selfishness, so she projected it outward, labeling Marisa as the selfish one. This is the classic shadow dynamic. The qualities we cannot accept in ourselves, we assign to others. For daughters like Marisa, the awakening comes when they recognize, this is not mine to carry. Narcissists also rely heavily on what Jung called the persona, the social mask we wear to navigate the world. Their persona is usually charming, successful, or benevolent. But when you pierce through the mask, you see what lies behind it: insecurity, fear, and an underdeveloped sense of true self. When you stop playing along, the persona starts to crack. To defend it, the narcissist lashes out with manipulation, often framing you as the villain to preserve their public mask. This is why many women feel so confused in these situations. On the one hand, they know they've acted with integrity. On the other hand, the narcissist's mask convinces outsiders that they're the virtuous one. The tension between the narcissist's public persona and your lived experience can feel unbearable. But Jung's work reminds us, the truth is revealed not in the persona, but in the integration of the shadow. And the narcissist, unlike you, refuses to take that step. So when a narcissist sees you as too strong to control, their last trick is to flip the narrative, to make you look like the abuser while they play the innocent. Recognizing this as projection allows you to stay grounded, to avoid internalizing their false story, and to continue walking the path of individuation. When we explore Jung's psychology further, another key concept that helps us decode the narcissist's final tactic is the anima and animus, the inner feminine and masculine energies present within all people. For narcissists, these inner figures are often distorted or underdeveloped. Instead of providing balance, they become harsh inner critics or fragile idealized images that the narcissist cannot live up to. When you show strength, whether by setting boundaries, walking away, or refusing to be manipulated, you awaken deep insecurity in the narcissist's psyche. They are confronted with their own weak animus or fragile anima. Instead of integrating this tension, they project it onto you. For example, if a narcissistic man feels threatened by a woman's independence, he might label her as cold, unfeminine, or aggressive. What he cannot accept in his own anima, the nurturing, receptive part of himself, he punishes in her. Take the story of Sophia, a professional woman who ended a long relationship with a narcissistic partner. When she finally stood her ground and left, her ex began telling mutual friends that Sophia was too masculine and heartless. In truth, what disturbed him was that she had embraced her own animus in a healthy way: assertiveness, clarity, and independence. Unable to integrate this within himself, he projected it onto her as a criticism. This is a perfect example of what Jung called enantiodromia, the tendency of things to turn into their opposite when taken to an extreme. The narcissist, who once idealized you as perfect, suddenly flips and demonizes you as the enemy. This swing from idealization to devaluation is not about you at all. It is about their inability to reconcile the split in their own psyche. This last dirty trick is so damaging because it attacks the very qualities that make you strong. If you're compassionate, they'll say you're weak. If you're assertive, they'll say you're cruel. If you set boundaries, they'll call you selfish. Each accusation is a projection of their own disowned traits. The trick is designed to confuse you into abandoning your growth and returning to the old pattern of compliance. But here's where Jung's wisdom is most empowering. When you recognize the projection for what it is, you stop carrying their shadow. You realize, this is their battle, not mine. And in doing so, you step further along the path of individuation, the process of becoming whole. For women especially, this process can feel both terrifying and liberating. It means breaking out of the old roles assigned by family, partners, or culture, and discovering the authentic self beneath. And often, the very moment you feel attacked the most by the narcissist's last dirty trick is the moment you're closest to breaking free. One of the most painful aspects of the narcissist's last dirty trick is the smear campaign. This is when they attempt to destroy your reputation in order to protect their own fragile self-image. Jung would explain this through the concept of the persona, the social mask we all wear. For narcissists, the persona is everything. It is carefully constructed, often polished to appear charming, successful, or generous. But when your strength threatens to expose what lies behind the mask, they panic. To preserve the illusion, they must paint you as the villain. Consider Rachel, who decided to end a long friendship with a narcissistic colleague. She had tolerated years of subtle put-downs and manipulations, but after working on herself through therapy and journaling, she finally said, "No more." Her colleague's reaction was immediate and brutal. Within weeks, Rachel heard from mutual acquaintances that she had been labeled jealous, toxic, and unstable. This wasn't about Rachel at all. It was her colleague's desperate attempt to hold on to a flawless persona by projecting her own instability outward. Jung's insight here is critical. Projection always reveals the projector more than the target. When a narcissist insists you're selfish, it's usually their own selfishness they can't face. When they say you're unstable, it's their own inner chaos spilling out. But if you don't understand projection, it's easy to internalize these accusations, doubting yourself, and losing confidence. Another tactic tied to the smear campaign is victim playing. The narcissist may suddenly appear fragile, telling others how deeply you've hurt them, while omitting the years of harm they caused. Jung would describe this as a refusal to face the shadow, the darker aspects of themselves that remain unconscious. By playing the victim, they disguise their shadow and demand sympathy, hoping to recruit others into their version of reality. But here's where individuation becomes powerful. When you are committed to becoming your authentic self, you realize that other people's perceptions are not the ultimate truth. The truth lies in your own integrity, your own wholeness. Jung reminded us that the path to individuation is rarely comfortable. It often requires enduring misunderstanding, isolation, or criticism. Yet, on the other side of this discomfort lies freedom. The freedom of not being controlled by another's narrative. For women especially, this can feel like a rebirth. No longer bound by the roles of caretaker, people pleaser, or rescuer, they learn to embrace their authentic voice. The smear campaign becomes a painful but temporary storm, while their true self emerges stronger than ever. The key is not to engage in the narcissist's game. The more you try to defend yourself against every lie, the more entangled you become. Instead, Jung would encourage turning inward, confronting your own shadow and trusting the strength of your authentic self to carry you through. As we move deeper into this topic, we must also talk about the inner battle that arises when facing the narcissist's last dirty trick. Jung taught that the psyche is not only made up of the conscious mind, but also the unconscious, filled with symbols, archetypes, and repressed emotions. When the narcissist projects their shadow onto you, it can awaken parts of your own shadow that you haven't yet confronted. For example, when accused of being selfish, you may feel a pang of guilt, even if you've only set healthy boundaries. This is because most women are conditioned, often from childhood, to identify with the caregiver archetype. Saying no feels dangerous, even though it is essential for individuation. Jung would encourage you not to reject the accusation outright, nor to accept it blindly, but to examine it. Is there any truth here? Or is this the narcissist's shadow, not mine? This process of discernment strengthens the self and weakens the narcissist's hold. Take Isabella, who left a toxic relationship after years of being told she was too demanding. Once free, she reflected, was she demanding, or was she simply asking for respect and equality? She realized that her partner had been projecting his own unwillingness to give on to her. By working with a therapist and journaling her dreams, a method Jung deeply valued, Isabella began to see that her demands were, in fact, her authentic needs. This insight transformed guilt into empowerment. This is why the narcissist's last trick, as painful as it is, often signals that you're at a turning point. You've grown too strong to be controlled, and the smear campaigns or victim plays are signs of their desperation. Jung called this confrontation with the shadow the dark night of the soul, a time when you feel surrounded by darkness, but also a time that precedes transformation. And here's the most empowering truth. Once you recognize the projection, you're no longer trapped in it. Instead of defending yourself endlessly, you begin to live authentically, trusting your own inner compass. The narcissist may shout, smear, and distort, but their power lies only in your willingness to believe them. Once you withdraw that belief, their influence fades. So, if you're in this stage of your journey, remember, the attack is not proof of your weakness, but of your strength. It means you've grown beyond their control and you're moving toward individuation. Hold on to your integrity, stay rooted in self-awareness, and trust that this storm too will pass. And before we uncover the final piece of this puzzle, what Jung teaches about breaking free from these cycles once and for all, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the last and most empowering part of this journey. Now we arrive at the most liberating part of this exploration. What happens after the narcissist's last dirty trick? Jung believed that the goal of life is individuation, the process of becoming whole, of integrating shadow and light, of stepping into your authentic self. For women who've endured narcissistic relationships, this journey is not only possible, it is often the natural outcome of breaking free. When you recognize the smear campaigns, the gaslighting, or the victim playing for what they are, projections, you stop carrying the narcissist's shadow. This moment of clarity is life-changing. You no longer waste energy trying to defend yourself against lies. Instead, you turn inward, reclaiming the parts of yourself that were silenced, your voice, your anger, your joy, and your creativity. Think of Lena, who spent years married to a narcissistic husband. After enduring constant accusations of being selfish and ungrateful, she finally left. At first, she was devastated by the smear campaign that followed, but slowly, through therapy and self-reflection, Lena realized those words were never about her. They were fragments of her husband's shadow. Once she stopped fighting his version of reality and began living her own, she discovered a sense of freedom she hadn't felt since childhood. Today, Lena runs workshops for other women, turning her pain into wisdom. This is the paradox Jung often spoke about. The wound becomes the source of healing. The shadow becomes the path to light. The narcissist's last dirty trick, as brutal as it feels, often marks the moment when a woman is closest to her breakthrough. It is proof that she has stepped into her strength, that she is no longer controllable, that her self is rising. From a Jungian perspective, the narcissist will likely never integrate their own shadow. But you can, and that makes all the difference. By refusing to internalize their projections, by owning your truth, you break the cycle not only for yourself, but often for future generations. You become the one who says, "This pattern ends with me." So if you find yourself the target of that last dirty trick, remember, it is not a sign of defeat, but a sign of transformation. It means you've become too strong for manipulation, and that the path ahead, though challenging, is one of authenticity, freedom, and wholeness. Your individuation is the greatest victory you could ever claim.